This is Soul of Travel. Welcome. I'm so glad to be here today for this special episode, speaking with Celeste Mergens from Days for Girls, which is a award-winning NGO working in advocacy, policy, health education, and doing so many great things to create awareness about menstrual health around the world. And I am just so thrilled to be able to be bringing you here to this conversation today. So welcome, Celeste.
So good to be with you today.
And part of why Celeste is here right now, Lotus CommuniTees is partnering with Days for Girls. So we have kind of a co-branded or co-identitied t-shirt design that's so cute. It says equality period on it. And again, that's kind of in an effort to bring attention to this topic that I think is so important, and clearly you feel the same. So I'm just really excited to, I think, bring attention to something that a lot of people are still not very aware of. And to kind of start our dialogue, I'm just going to share kind of my aha moment, which I think is valuable. I remember listening to a podcast about the topic, and actually, I think it was really more around like the period panties or something like that. And they were talking about, how it's so important and access to hygiene. And then she made mention of the fact that, women and girls are missing school and work because they don't have access to proper care. They are just missing out on being contributing members of society and of their life. And my brain just kind of exploded because I had never thought about it. Was never a question that was posed to me. It just wasn't something that was a part of my daily life. And the minute that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, like, one, I was a little embarrassed, like being a world traveler, being someone who sits in the space of feminism, of activism for women, empowering women. I'm like, how did this not even cross my radar? This seems impossible. So,
I felt the
I
same way when I first
yeah,
learned about it. Yeah.
so I just think, like, I hope that we can blow a lot of minds. That's what I want to do with this conversation, is just get a lot of people excited about talking about something that people don't like to talk about. And again, for you, shattering that stigma around menstruation is a huge part of your work. And so I'm just really excited to like be a little tiny piece of that wheel in this moment. So Celeste, I would love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of history about Days for Girls, and then we'll from there go to like where Days for Girls started and how that evolved.
Thanks. That sounds like a great challenge. Hi, everyone. I'm Celeste Mergens and founder of Days for Girls International. And Days for Girls, as you just heard or heard about the issue, we help women, girls, and people to identify as with and not as girls, but have periods. Anyone all over the world that needs menstrual care, we help them have access to period products and women's health education. This is so important to shift the shatter the shame, the stigma, and the limiting opportunities that happens if you don't have what you need. When Days for Girls started, I hadn't even thought about menstrual equity before. I hadn't thought about what do they do for periods, even though I, as a teenager, sometimes had to resort to whatever I could find because I didn't have what I needed. When you're in the field, I was working in Kenya. I had been off and on for about 18 months. I was helping an orphanage there whenever I came through town. And I learned that the girls were sitting on pieces of cardboard for days during their periods. And I had never thought to even ask what they did for menstrual hygiene before it came to my mind to ask. And that inspiration resulted in learning that not only were they missing school, not only were they missing the dignity of having what they needed to take care of themselves, But when we got there with education, which has always come with Days for Girls, the opportunity to talk about a period is nothing to be afraid of or ashamed of or stigmatized because of it. In fact, without periods, there would be no people. And the miracle of their amazing bodies. And here, now you have something you can care for yourself with. That combination gave the first 10 girls that came to the door after receiving their kits, and their voices are all singing off the tin roof, and they're standing in front of me with these big smiles and red school uniforms. And they said, thank you so much, because before you came, we had to let them use us if we wanted to leave the room and go to class. And I was hoping that didn't mean what I feared it meant. And I asked them, please, we had 250 more girls to come through, and they promised to be there when we finished, and they confirmed that they were being sexually exploited in exchange for a single disposable pad. And that was the moment Days for Girls was born. What I didn't know was that this is a global issue. Guaranteed, where you are, there are people that are having to choose between food and pads. Guaranteed that no matter what neighborhood, there are people choosing. And we get the gift of helping people have the confidence of what they need. And today, Days for Girls has reached 144 countries on 6 continents. And just this morning, I learned that we just hit the number 2.3 million women and girls earlier this morning.
Excellent. Congratulations, Celeste. Thank you for sharing that. I think, I mean, obviously this topic can be uncomfortable for so many reasons. One, I think we feel uncomfortable when we don't realize that there's such a problem in our global community. Two, like I said, women's health, menstruation is an uncomfortable topic. And three, a lot of times we feel overwhelmed by the hardships that we see that we are really not in face-to-face contact with. We feel a lot of guilt and personal shame when it's kind of revealed to us. And so I really appreciate the stage that's set for that conversation. And like you said, education is such a critical piece of what the work you're doing. I had a really amazing moment in Guatemala one time. I met with a group of young girls, and they were a part of a club, and I didn't really know what the club was, but they wanted to meet me because I was visiting their village. And so I met with them, and they were like, you know, Miss Christine, this is our club. We learn about our bodies. We learn about our periods. We learn about menstruation. We learn about fertility. And these girls were probably ages 8 to like 14. And my mind was kind of blown in that moment as well, because I thought there would never be a group of girls in the US that I would meet that would be speaking to me so openly about this topic with so much confidence and pride. And so like that was another kind of light bulb moment of like, the education we're sharing needs to come from this same place of empowerment. I have 3 daughters, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to make sure that any of the thing that I've carried forward of discomfort and shame is erased so that they can have that confidence. But I think even more so in places where cultures really discriminate against menstruation. And that was one thing that I wanted to speak to you about, is what does menstruation look like in other parts of the world for those of us who have not traveled, haven't encountered these situations, these conversations, haven't asked the question because we wouldn't have thought to have asked. Can you share with us a little bit what that does look like?
It's interesting because while the common ground we have of our bodies and biology is so much the same, we have the same concerns and the same issues and need for that confidence to have what we need. They use many diverse things. Really, it's whatever you can get a hold of, right? So that might be newspaper, cloth that's not secured. So it might, for instance, in Nepal, they'll have these long pieces of sari that are tied with a string from the front of their waist to the back of their waist. And it can chafe and twirl and doesn't have a moisture barrier. So you really can't sit with confidence. And in other areas, it will be lots and lots of layers of skirts so that it can hide it. But again, the concern of stains and menses showing, and again, the risk of infection because you can't manage it very well. And it could be in parts of the Maasai, for instance, in Kenya, will use some of them, splattered cow dung from the cattle that they shake out the bugs from. They want the thinnest piece, break it into pieces, and that's their pad. It could be a horn, a stone, or a corn cob that's inserted to kind of keep the flow from happening. It could be anything that will work for them. They're very creative in trying to have the confidence of their days. Could sometimes sitting on the rocks by the river, which amazingly makes them vulnerable to being attacked. You would think that they'd, but it's a vulnerable place for women when they don't have what they need. And in Nepal, Western Nepal, there's a practice called, and also India, a practice called Chaupati. And this practice is that you're untouchable when you're menstruating. You're not allowed to go on the pathway to your home. You're maybe in the crawl space or out with the oxen or an elevated platform, cave, or the forest. And you're there for the duration of your period. And if you've just had a baby, it's 10 to 21 days of isolation. And they're risking exposure, death, snake bites. The truth is that it's easy for us from the outside to look and say, well, so just stop already, right? It's been against the law since 2005. It's been a finable offense since the end of 2018. So why would it go on? The truth is, if you don't know what a period is, everything associated with blood is illness, injury. So if you're told you're untouchable, you are a danger to your community, to your family, they could have ill fortune, they could have death. Do you want to cause that? It'd be easy to believe that. And you would believe you were cursed. And you and I, and all of your listeners, I'm sure, would protect your family. No law, no fine would keep you from protecting your family. They're heroes trying to protect their family without the knowledge of they are touchable, that they are strong, and that they, even during those days, have major contributions to give. So Days for Girls, Nepal leaders, so the women there, make Days for Girls kits, providing washable supplies and local leadership and jobs. They go on the pathways that are too narrow for a car to go on, with baskets and the education, and they conduct women's circles where they invite, hey, this is what a period is, and what if you ritually cleanse this pad instead of isolating? The law wouldn't stop you. You would be making a new choice and embracing your rich tradition in a new way. And they have this conversation not just with the women, but with the men, because if you're going to break stigma, it has to be knowledge for all of us, to not be afraid to talk about this thing that literally connects us all. And that conversation is a big part of having what you need and knowing what a period is, and having a local voice to lead that is a powerful way to shatter the stigma. In fact, in some communities, they're tearing down the chapati huts with their own two hands. And that's not because someone shamed them. That's because they got an invitation to take this on in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so amazing. And I can really, I guess I can really empathize with that being a part of your culture, and you knowing that story, right? Like that you are protecting your family, this is the tradition. Traditions are really hard to overcome in societies. I mean, we're not immune to that here in the United States either. And so I can really relate to that. And to be able to hear someone tell you, and especially a voice you trust, like you mentioned, having local leaders, that you don't need to feel shame and you don't need to feel guilt and you don't need to feel isolation, that would be really freeing. I can't really understand, like that must just be an unbelievable sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm. And even here, do you know, communities and schools called years ago and said that in New Orleans, there was this same problem, that 3,200 girls were going without what they needed for period products, and that the nurses had to give them either something they bought or paper towels, have them turn their skirt around, cover the stain with a book. go home, come back when your period's over. And that is hard to believe, but think about, what does a homeless girl do? What does a foster girl do? What do you do if you don't have that resource? And recognizing that it wasn't just that, it was also that there was actual law to not talk about anything about reproductive health. Periods got stuck in that bucket. And by doing that, we ignore really important conversations that can lead to more safety and more dignity and more health and hope. It's a really important conversation to have positively, like we are today.
Yeah, I agree. I just remember being a young girl and craving that knowledge about myself, right? And knowing there's going to be like this 20-minute conversation in fourth grade that's going to be like very edited, and that's all I'm going to get. And and then also being just probably 4 years ago at a women's conference, and actually Dr. Christiane Northrup was doing a presentation on women's bodies, and sitting with like 800 women as she's talking about parts of female anatomy and things, and that I'm sure 80% of us were not aware of still, like as adult women. And I was thinking, what is happening in this system that is not allowing us to speak about this? And then going back to this not being just a global issue or an issue tied to developing countries, you mentioned here in the US, and I was listening to the Days for Girls podcast a little while ago, which I highly encourage if this is a topic that is piquing your interest or you want to learn more. The Days for Girls podcast is incredible. I have really enjoyed but talking about on Native American communities and access to proper care, and even then thinking about myself in college. And I had those very same moments, right? Like I need a book, I need food, I need to pay my phone bill, and I need tampons, and I cannot do all of them. And kind of in that moment, I was thinking, like, isn't this like a medical necessity? Could I not get a prescription for this product? And so, like, very early in my thought process, I guess I was kind of trying to think about, like, this is a necessity, but it kind of gets lumped into this thing we can't talk about. And then on top of that, there's taxes on feminine hygiene products, and that makes it even less accessible. And I think that's indicative
Luxury
of like
tax, right?
a much larger problem. But it's just so interesting once you start kind of pulling at the threads around this issue, what starts to unravel and what you're aware of. You mentioned bringing men into the conversation, and that this isn't just a conversation for women. I think aligned with what I was just saying, how have you seen that create bigger changes in the communities that you're working in?
Oh, it's so powerful. One, we know from data that they then stand up for the women not to be mocked and for girls not to be shamed at the classroom. We have one leader in Kenya who, just to give the degree of the shame, who didn't stand up because she had a stain on her clothing, and her teacher, considering that she was not respecting him, slapped her. And then she had, of course, this menstrual stain. And so she started trying to use pieces of pages. That didn't work. She did hang in there and do her best, but sometimes the consequences are they drop out. Sometimes I've met one woman that's a leader of Days for Girls who was called Red Drop. She who has red drops from then on is her nickname, because of what happened when she was a young woman, and she now had 3 children. So the consequences are long lasting. So if you reverse it and the men know what this is, instead of shaming and becoming part of that teasing, instead they are part of defending and saying this is important. The other great thing, I just had a message come in a few days ago that someone was sharing that the men who start their conversation with what is strength in your community, and what does it mean to be a strong man for your family, and what kind of future do you want? And one kind of strength is health. And then it goes into, you're invited to be a man who knows. It's called Men Who Know. And then it talks about health, periods, puberty, health and hygiene and all sorts of things. And that what happened is several of the men said that they decided that if they were going to be strong leaders in their community, they had to go start at home. So one apologized for beating his wife and committed to supporting her. And one wife had said, I don't want you to go. He was a headmaster. I don't want you to go. I want you to be home this weekend. And when after he'd been there the next weekend, she goes, I want you to go because this past week has been so much better. And he went on to teach his staff, hey, we got to talk about periods. So having everyone be part of the conversation is such a powerful thing. And we have seen leaders like the Alice, who's the one that was slapped. She went on to found the Days for Girls enterprise and employs more than a dozen people, providing thousands of kits, and more importantly, or just as importantly, the education for her community. It's a really powerful thing to put that leadership, and it should be everyone. This is a big shift we're asking, but it's one that will make a huge difference and one that can happen in our lifetime.
Yeah. That was definitely something I wanted to pull into this conversation as well, is that, I mean, there are so many issues that are kind of feeling unsurmountable in this moment. And I love that when you speak about Days for Girls, like, one, your passion is infectious, and I really appreciate that. But two, that there really does seem a possibility that we can see the end of this. Like, we can be a part and witness this journey to completion. And I think that that feels like a great thing to be a part of right now, especially because we really want something that we can hold on to that feels tangible and available and so impactful for so many women. And then not just women, but that ripples out into families and communities and countries. So I think it's just such an amazing thing to be a part of and to think about.
You're so right. That's one of my favorite things about this, and what gets me up early in the morning to get started again. There are so many things that are hard to change, and menstrual equity and all the benefits is not one of them. We can achieve this in our life. And that something so simple can have such powerful impact. You're spot on. It benefits the whole family, the whole community, the whole country, and our whole world, for everyone to have the fullness of their confidence. You know what? Can I share with you a message that came in like 4 weeks ago now? May I?
Sure. Yes,
Okay,
please.
I'll read it to you. We're going to need the power of the glasses here. Okay, it's so in Malawi. So in Malawi, there is a practice called dusting off. This is a ritual that happens to when you start menstruating. So as soon as you have your first period, you need to be ritually cleansed. And they do this as trigger alert. This is hard to hear, but there's good news. A man called a hyena is hired by the family to sexually purify her. She's blindfolded and attacked because she started her first period, making her vulnerable to infection, to loss, and to a lot of pregnancy, right? Pregnancy as well. So here's one of the highest rates of childhood marriage and pregnancy in the world. So that community has Days for Girls leader. The first lady there is committed to shifting at the Minister of Gender and Health and Education, all partner with Days for Girls to take on that country having it. So this is one of the leaders in a really remote area that's hard to get to. Here's what she says happened. As the team packed up to go after our kickoff event at Chilambando Primary School, a group of boys lingered around. One of the girls that had attended our ambassador health training and had received the Supreme kit was walking past the boys. Malendia Katundu, you have received a package? One of the boys called out. His friends jeered rudely. The girl was not embarrassed. Instead, she faced them and said to their face, Nalandira Gumani, yes, I have received. I'll proudly carry it without shame because I learned today that menstruation is not something to be ashamed of. I need to embrace it and be proud of it because I am wonderfully made. She then walked away, a victory smile on her face. This made our team so proud to know that we had made a huge impact on the life of a girl who could be so brave. So not just her days back, not just the health and the dignity, but the confidence to know her own strength and to embrace every part of her being. When it's something that's taboo, and that shifts, the
Mhm.
rest of the issues are easy to surmount next.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. Yeah, I just, it's so hard to convey the power of this shift without really witnessing it. But I really appreciate that, because it is, you can feel that strength from that girl to be able to turn and stand and to tell these boys this. So I think,
Isn't that amazing?
yeah, it's so incredible. Um, well, I wanted to talk as well about, I wanted to let people know what the kits are, how they've evolved, and when, just for people for reference, if they are supporting either Lotus CommuniTees or supporting Days for Girls directly, what do the kits include? And I know they've evolved and they have a lot of different pieces. And how do those support um, providing what girls need?
That was me reaching down to grab one for you. I didn't come
Okay,
prepared to do that. Who does it?
that's
So
okay.
washable Days for Girls kit, we say they last 2 to 3 years. By some report as long as 5 years. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And there's a shield, and this is the part that holds the they snap together in this nice little packet that holds the absorbent liner. And the absorbent liners are made of flannel and they don't look like a pad. So this is how you make a pad not look like a pad. Here's the absorbency, and ready? Ta-da! So this innovation, we've been through 31 iterations of our pad design so that they are physically, environmentally, and culturally relevant. And this makes it wash with very little water, important to a lot of the people we serve, and to dry quickly. So when it's folded, when it's out, it's got a large surface area, but you can fold it in 3 and have 6 layers of absorbency. And on the side, it's just 1 layer. So 3 on the side, which means you can layer more than 1 and you don't get bulk in the pocket. So this, by being 2 pieces, it's flexible to her flow. It makes it possible for her to wash it easily, and it doesn't look like a pad. So she doesn't have to worry about whatever stigma she's facing in her community. And that's how you make it work in diverse cultures all over the planet.
Yeah. And I love that it is so long lasting, especially looking at, environmental needs, because, in a lot of areas where you are working, there's not, you can't easily dispose something. So that's a consideration that people might not be aware of, where, providing one-time use products is just not culturally appropriate. It doesn't work in that environment, and you have to have access to it then over and over and over and over again. So I love that this is just like, it's a really sustainable solution, and that they are really cute. For those of you that will listen to the podcast, I encourage you to look on the website. They're like bright colored flannel. I have had the luck of being able to see kits in person, and they're very comfortable feeling, and I had cloth diapered my children, and so when I saw this, I was like, this is so brilliant. Like, why haven't we thought of this in our culture? Like, why are we still using one-time use sanitation products? Like, this could be something that's transitioned into our lifestyle to be more environmentally friendly. And I know, I think I believe that this is something that might be on the horizon for Days for Girls. Is that something you can speak to?
We're working on feasibility for it being a product people can purchase, and it supports our work around the globe. We're in that process now and hoping that by next year that can be an option available to people that they can benefit and also benefit the work around the world. And, for me, the first time we supplied for the girls I told you about at the beginning, menstrual care, it was disposable products. That's all I knew about, were single use products. And so that's what we provided. But I knew if they needed food the next month and we sent money for pads, it would be used for food, rightly so. So how did you give them something they could count on month after month? And so we made the first washable pads, and it was a really bad design. They were white and looked like a pad because it was a pad. But I knew to listen, and they shared that they couldn't hang this outside. And looking back, of course, we wouldn't want to either have a Menses stained white thing hanging in our front yard. And so they were putting it under their beds between the mattress and the springs to try to dry, and that can create infection. So how did we make them dry fast and not look like a pad? And that adventure of listening has really paid off. Today, Days for Girls holds 2 patents for our work with Days for around the world for this product. And we also provide menstrual cups, which work really well. They last up to 10 years. And a lot of cultures and a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, think how many use it where we live. For a lot of reasons, not everyone is open to using them, though more so. Currently, only about 3% of those we serve are open to using them. It should be about the choice that works for each individual. And at Days for Girls, we've seen there's way more of a match culturally, physically, and that sustainability with washable pads. The first school I came to that I was describing, when we got there, those first disposable pads were clogging up the latrines, were rolled up and disposed of, quote unquote, in the chain link adjacent to the latrines and piled on the post, and a pile at the end. And even a girl had reached in to grab one and was like, what? And it was to wash it, dry it, and reuse a disposed pad she found. Because there is no way, there's no place for them to dispose of it. So stigma, further health issues, and frankly, environmental issues as well. There are a lot of reasons that washable became the way that Days for Girls focused.
Yeah. You mentioned one thing that I think is really important in your work too, is the listening aspect. And, you know, you had the moment that was your catalyst to create impact, where your travel experience influenced the action that led to Days for Girls. And it was, you know, your modern design, your thought of how this might work. And then continually you've gone to the communities that you work within to create changes and evolve and continue to grow not only your product, but your model for how you serve communities. And I know when I first heard of Days for Girls, the people that were going and distributing kits that were made in the United States by volunteers, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But now you have enterprise that has shifted so that you can create, not only bring the products, but they can be made locally. You can create entrepreneurs and businesses for women in those countries. And the education is now being taken over by local community leaders, so that it gives them the ability to be empowered in this movement, but also the people receiving the information are more trusting, I would assume, receiving it from someone from their community and not me coming in as an outsider. But can you talk what that experience has been like to kind of move through that motion?
I think it's an important continuum, right? This really is global stigma. People where I live would rather talk about diarrhea than menstruation. That's awful, but that's the truth. And at the beginning, when Days for Girls started, we'd have people sign up to have me come speak, learn about what I was going to talk about, and cancel. Oh no, not that, anything but that. And how sad is that? And to know that millions, 500 million women and girls are estimated to be going without the proper menstrual care products they need. And so this has to be a global conversation. And so having local volunteers, it started where I live and then grew on from there with the invitation, yes, come help. This is a big issue, let's do it together. And partners and partnerships, and local volunteers will make, or people will make them and send them with organizations like yours that are already going out to serve a community, and make sure that the education comes with it. In some communities, there are leaders that said, I want to keep doing this. I am all in to have this happen in my community. And then they became part of the Days for Girls enterprises, took on that leadership, and did the very difficult and important work of providing jobs and doing the education. This, you're right, makes it a voice that's trusted, They know what the obstacles and taboos, and they can say, can you see, does it make sense that you would be cursed? Can you see this is what your body really is? They can say that and know what minds to avoid and how to address it, right? In a way that none of us could through a translator. But one seeds the local market and the conversation, and the other can take that leadership up. So we have a unique zone system that recognizes where there are really strong enterprises and leaders. Don't take free kits there made by volunteers. Put those with refugees. They've reached hundreds, like tens of thousands. I think 43,000 refugees just last year alone. And also to places where these enterprises don't exist. So the cycle of direct local influence can continue while we're all advocating for this shift to happen in our world, and the conversation to be positive with our friends, family, and people we connect with, and to make sure these enterprises can engage. So it's been interesting to watch this stream. One of my favorite moments that showed this, besides what I just read you, and so many more, but one moment that was a big aha for me was being in northern Uganda, in Gulu. A leader from Gulu was sitting in front of me, and I asked her, so what is most helpful? What is working for you? What is not working for you? How has it affected your life to be doing this work? And she said, people know who I am and they listen to me. My family can eat every day, or my children can go to school and my family can eat every day. And I was so struck by her comment not being first. We eat every day, not being first, my children can go to school, but rather that people know who she is and listens to her. And I don't think that's indicative of her not understanding how important her family eating is, but rather how important and powerful it was to her to have a voice, to be part of the shift, to be part of greater wellness in her community. How much that meant to her was more than eating every day. That is such a powerful thing to be part of creating, and supporting Days for Girls is engaging more of that around the planet while shattering the stigma, while giving girls their days back.
I gotta almost catch myself here for a second, because for me, being a part of a global community and traveling and getting to experience moments like that, that's why I travel. That's why I am really passionate about connecting women together so that those shared experiences can happen. And so we can witness each other, because that moment that you're talking about, that woman feeling seen and heard and recognized, is really my overarching mission in life. And so I just think it's so powerful. I really do think it's beyond measure. It's going back to that little girl as well, being able to stand up for herself and say, yes, I have this package, and know in herself what that means. And I think, again, that goes back to what will that mean in the greater scale of things, to have confident, educated, strong women leaders who are spreading that with throughout their communities. And I remember being in Uganda myself and sitting in circle with women and hearing what they had to say and what their ambitions were and what their needs were and what they were going to do when they had access to XYZ to extend that and support their communities and their schools. And I just am so passionate about what it means to give that to a girl and to a woman, and what that means for our world. So I really, really just deeply appreciate the work that you are doing.
It's such a pleasure. And we get to do it together. And that's the power of it.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up our conversation, is there anything else that you wanted to add or to share? I know we talked about health education and policy and advocacy. We went over the kits. Is there anything important that we missed while we have an audience that's listening to us speak about this topic?
right? Well, we do have matching funds right now. So now and through the next couple of months, there's opportunity to get involved with that. And I'm just so grateful that in this world where so many things divide us right now, in this world where so many things are heavy and difficult, that something that is hidden in difficulty is actually one of the keys to reversing cycles of division and cycles of poverty and cycles of lack, that we can actually change things to improve lives and be part of watching lives shine and rise in such a simple, direct way is so remarkable to me. And it always makes me wonder, what else are we missing? I think that the story of Days for Girls and the power that is here is really an invitation to recognize that every one of us matters, that we have way more in common than any differences we have.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, thank you so much, Celeste. I feel like that's just such a perfect spot for us to end our conversation. For people that want to be involved with supporting Days for Girls, learning more, what's the best means for them to do that?
Our website has all the information, how to get involved, how to support us, more of the stories. The videos are breathtaking. And that's just daysforgirls.org.
Thank you. I really encourage people, like I said, visit the website, learn more, listen to the podcast. Such really powerful conversations being held in that space. Actually, next week, 2 weeks, one of the guests that Jessica, who works with you at Days for Girls, one of her guests is going to be on my podcast from Uganda. And I'm just really excited to share her story in this space as well. So again, if you want to learn a little bit more about this topic, you can join me for that interview. If you want to support Days for Girls through Lotus CommuniTees, you can look for our Equality Period shirt until this Saturday. And I just really appreciate this time. It's a very treasured connection. I have been so excited about Days for Girls since I first heard about it, and I cannot wait to be traveling and supporting it in that way again, but just to continue to encourage people to bring this conversation to the table and get comfortable with it and see what kind of shift we can create
Together. I'm so glad we had this time.
Yes. Thank you so much.